Hutchins, a member of the class of 2015, and I want to welcome each one of you to the 69th Annual Family Institute Conference Crown Forum. The Family Institute is the longest-running social science research conference in the nation, so it's a privilege for us to be here today. And our theme this year is Black Educators Bringing Black Men In and Speaking the Truth. Each one of you will open your programs. There's an excerpt. In the excerpt on the back of the program is a poem called Speak the Truth to the People by Mari Evans. I want you to follow along as I read this aloud. Speak the truth to the people. Talk sense to the people. Free them with honesty. Free the people with love and courage for their being. Spare them fantasy. Fantasy enslaves. A slave is enslaved. Can be enslaved by unwisdom, can be reslaved while in the flight from enemy, can be enslaved by his brother whom he loves. His brother whom he trusts, whom he loves. His brother whom he trusts. His brother with the loud voice and the unwisdom, speak the truth to the people. It is not necessary to green the heart, only to identify the enemy. It is not necessary to blow the mind, only to free the mind. To identify the enemy is to free the mind. A free mind has no need to scream. A free mind is ready for other things, to build black schools, to build black children, to build black minds, to build black love, to build black impregnability, to build a strong black nation, to build. Speak the truth to the people. Spare them the opium of double hate. They need no trips on honky chants. Move them instead to a black oneness, a black strength which will define its own, needing no cacophony of screams for activation. A black strength that will attack the laws, exposes the lies, disassembles the structure and ravages the very foundation of evil. Speak the truth to the people. To identify the enemy is to free the mind of the people. Speak to the mind of the people. Speak truth. I just want to give a brief introduction of our speaker. I had the pleasure last night of having dinner with Mr. Jeff Johnson and kind of hearing some of his thoughts as far as education and as far as things that he wants to, his ideas on making education collaborative. And I know we've recognized Jeff Johnson. We've seen him on MSNBC. We've seen him on BET. He's a journalist. He's a social activist, a commentator. But today he's here to share a lot of his great ideas and his knowledge with us on how we can make education a collaborative effort with everyone here in this room. So, brothers, with no further ado, welcome Mr. Jeff Johnson to the stage.
Thank you, Reginald. To our president, to our provost, to all the members of the faculty and staff, any board members if they happen to be here, the men of Morehouse, it's my pleasure to be here. I want to get directly into our conversation since we don't have a ton of time. And really talk about the notion of an education ecosystem. And when we say education ecosystem, I mean the ecosystem that ultimately has to be created to determine that the education system in the United States is providing young people with what it is they need to ultimately create the future that they want. And what we have so often in the conversation about education is very vague terminology that is never connected to details that help us understand what each other are talking about or what the ultimate goal is. And so often you hear people say, parents, politicians, educators say, we are fighting for quality education. Well, what is quality education? What does quality look like? What is the end product of a delivery system of education that determines what a young person can do? And so there are a couple of things that I want us to think about, and then I want us to be able to have some exchange with some questions. And because the audience is large and because of the time that we have, I would like for you all to do something for me. If, in the midst of the conversation, you have a question, tweet it to me at Jeff's Nation, Jeffs Nation, no S at the end, Jeff's Nation. At the end, I will attempt to address as many questions as I can. Y'all with me? For those of you that aren't with me, are you now with me? All right. So, the challenge that we have as we talk about education reform in 2013 is that too many people have differing opinions on what reform means, whether they use the word reform or whether they use the word choice. Most of the time, the definition of that terminology is based on your politics, not necessarily the practical application of educational delivery system to be able to create young people that have the ability to function properly in this global economy. So if you are on the left wing, normally you see reform as meaning, how do we create charter schools? How do we insert vouchers? How do we take opportunity away from public schools? How do we take resources away from public schools? And in many cases, how do we destabilize public education as it has traditionally existed? On the right, it ultimately then means, how do we create free market where we are using and privatizing education for the purpose of being able to create competition that ultimately ensures that the best and brightest are given what they need, and no longer do you have folks able to continue to do the status quo without certain results. The challenge for black folks is that neither assertion is what we need. Somewhere in the middle, there is a reform, a remix, a change, a redefinition that ultimately has to be in our minds about how do we create education in a way where every single black boy and black girl that comes, whether you're in rural America or urban America or suburban America, as you matriculate through secondary education, that you are in a place where you can create a future for yourself that is putting you in a position to be better than your parents, to be able to earn more than your parents, to be able to have a career that is greater than that your parents had. That should be the purpose of education. But if we're honest, that's not what we have in 2013. And as we look at not just institutions of higher education that are open admission institutions, that are having clear challenges with the preparedness level of those that are coming into their institution, here even at Morehouse, there is a challenge as it relates to matriculation and graduation that is oftentimes connected to the poor education that many of us had at the secondary level coming to Morehouse. And so how do we then begin to, one, change the conversation, and then two, find spaces for you all, no matter what your major is, to be part of this educational ecosystem? So number one, let's take back the dialogue. Here in Morehouse College, there is an opportunity, whether it's through the Morehouse Research Institute, whether it's through the research that you all actually do, to take back the narrative of what education reform, school choice, education advancement means and looks like. And so what it should mean and look like is, how do we change the delivery system of education to make sure we are producing something that has the ability to go where it wants to go? And when you hear people talking about choice, this is not some arbitrary kind of statement that is about just an opportunity of providing business. Choice should mean, how are you creating as many options as possible for young people who have different trajectories to ultimately be successful? Understanding that every young person is not going to college. Some will immediately be entrepreneurs. Some will go to trade schools. Some will travel the world. Some will go to institutions of higher education. Some will go to community colleges. But if we don't have choice options at the secondary level, then what we're saying to young people is that everybody has the same path. And the United States system of education has been antiquated in that regard for the last 3 decades. If you travel to Europe, if you traveled abroad, you would understand that there was always a notion that there were ultimate different paths for those that would go to university, those that would go to polytechnic, those that would ultimately go into the workspace. And in America, very often, we have sold college as a yellow brick road to success, not simply because college provides opportunity, but because college is a revenue stream for the state. And in no other country in the world is the university, public institutions, a revenue stream for the state. And so if the state of Georgia, if the state of California, if the state of Ohio wants to continue to maximize that revenue stream, they have to fill colleges and universities with individuals, whether they are qualified or not. And they understand that they benefit by you continuing to fill institutions of higher education, getting your tuition, taking that money, whether you effectively matriculate or don't matriculate. And so school choice has to be about, how do we change the narrative to say, what are the multiple options that young people need to have to be able to create the life that they want to? As we begin to change that narrative, And that narrative is built by understanding that an education ecosystem is not just about teachers. It's not just about principals. It's not just about schools. It is about the broader society understanding its responsibility to invest in the creation of this education delivery system, finding spaces to be able to put talent and skill set as well as resources, feeding it and fueling it, so that on the back end, the product that's created is not one that was just touched by parents, teachers, and principals, but it's one that's touched by the nonprofit space. It's one that's touched by the corporate community. It's one that's touched by politicians and legislators. It's one that's touched by community members, churches, parents, nonprofit organizations, the foundation community, all investing in the creation of individuals that will advance not just the economy, but the society and culture. What we see, even at Morehouse, is so often when we talk about education, we're talking about how do we get more black male teachers. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We should be having that discussion. We should be having the discussion about how do we get those that are interested in teaching into teacher certification programs, expanding the opportunities here at Morehouse as it relates to teaching certification, utilizing the existing resources, and matriculating young men that will graduate from teacher cert programs, passing the praxis, and hopefully going into the classroom. Whether they're on a master teacher track, whether they're on a principal track, whether they're on a superintendent track, all of that should be part of the conversation. But it should not be the sum total of the conversation. Brothers that are here in science, those that are here in business, those that are here no matter what the major is, there is an on-ramp for you to be involved in the ecosystem of effectively preparing an education delivery system that is far beyond where we are right now. And so if you are going into the private sector, if you want to be in business, there is no public school system in America that is going to be effective in the next decade if there is not corporate investment. And corporate investment has a number of different looks to it. So whether that means in a city like Cleveland where they're currently doing a reform plan, and you've got the 5 largest companies in the city talking about what their investment strategy is going to be over the course of the next 10 years, that's not just about how do we put money into schools. That's about how do you create executive on loans to a public school system. How do you create opportunities for executives and members of companies to be in the classroom providing practical application during the learning process? How do you create opportunities of giving internships and externships and opportunities within corporations and businesses so that young people have the space to be able to practically learn? All of those are responsibilities of a corporate community that understands the value of a more effective education system. The problem is if you don't have education-minded folks in the corporate space, then you never see how those people understand that an effective school system is part of the bottom line of any company in that given area. Not only are those students going to ultimately be the supply chain to personnel within those companies, but they are going to be consumers of their products. They are going to be people that they're selling products to. So all of it is connected, thus why we call it the ecosystem. From the policy standpoint, there's an entry place. And so for those of you that are talking about public affairs or going into policy or going into education, we have to have more effective education policy. And that happens, one, on the research side. So much of the work that we see Dr. Marks doing through the Morehouse Research Institute around education reform is not just about how to get teachers in the classroom, but it's about how are we looking at best practices of how to build delivery systems. What should teachers look like? How should school funding look? What are opportunities that can be created by shifting how at the state level we spend money? All of us understand that there is no state in America where we spend more to educate than we do to incarcerate. Every single state budget in the country spends more money on incarceration than they do on education, and then wonders why third graders can't read. Well, third graders can't read if it ultimately is a policy for most corrections facilities to base new facilities on third grade literacy. So if we're using third grade literacy as the litmus for building new facilities, we are actually looking at third graders who can't read, saying, here is the number that can't read. Now we understand that we got to build prisons for them. But as opposed to building prisons for them, teach them to read. Shift the resources to say, wait a minute, if we shift resources from these areas to be able to create more effective ways of educating, then we find these third graders now in the fourth and fifth grade being able to read on level. I have a son who's dyslexic. And so my son was not reading at grade level in the third grade, in the fourth grade, in the fifth grade, or in the sixth, or he's now in the sixth grade. And there was nowhere in the public schools an opportunity for somebody to say, I think your child has dyslexia. So I got a brilliant kid sitting in the living room, frustrated about why he can't read. And there is a system in place that cannot effectively diagnose the issue that with intervention puts him in a place to be able to read on grade level. So whether we're talking about learning disabilities or whether we're talking about the most brilliant kid in the classroom that has no learning difficulties, we have to begin engaging policy in a way that effectively creates not just the ecosystem, but the delivery system that works the way that it needs to. I would challenge each of you, no matter what you think no matter what your major is, no matter what field you want to go to, no matter how you think the trajectory of your professional life is going to go, that if you as a black man save your position or title is not vested in what public education looks like, then we are part of the problem. And that means, how do we as young men see ourselves ultimately investing in the recreation of a system that's got to build new black students? Because I don't know about you, I'm tired of seeing, because we have standardized tests that have essentially said, how can you be proficient? And now the goal is proficiency versus mastery. Thinking that we are going to create young men that have the ability to effectively matriculate and graduate from Morehouse if you're proficient in a system that is already improficient. How does that work? How do you find black men that are able to use God-given intellect and have it tailored in a way that it is invested in, that we don't just want to be employees of somebody else's company, but we're using critical thinking and innovation to be able to build what never existed before we showed up? The last I checked, Morehouse was not created for mediocrity, nor was it created to men to be comfortable matriculating to get a job on Wall Street just to be able to make money to get high. We should never be afraid of money. What we should be afraid of is unconscious people that use money just to gain the accoutrements of a capitalist society, that they would be able to say that they made it because of who tailored their suit, the car that they drive, the house that they live in, but they truly are miseducated Negroes because they have not invested back into the system. So the question is not, do you like what I have to say? Because I don't care. Not mildly, not at all. What I care about is the fact that in Atlanta right now, there are thousands of young people going to schools that will not prepare them for their future. What I care about is there are boys that look like you from the same communities that you come from, that idolize who you are even though you don't realize it, that are in a place where they will probably not meet a man who goes to college that is willing to be in their life. What I care about is schools that think that because you hold on to teachers using antiquated methods of seniority, that means that somehow you're honoring the profession. What I care about is, how do we effectively use dollars, understanding that no amount of money can fix a school that doesn't work. Pouring more money into a system that doesn't work is like buying a car and you put new rims on it, you put new tires on it, you put new interior on it, you put a new sound system in it, you kit the joint out, you got a satellite in it that can speak to somebody on Mars, but it ain't got no engine. And so you created all these bells and whistles that look good, but the fundamental part that makes it move doesn't work. And so if we don't get to the heart of the engine that fuels education as black men, understanding that I don't have to be a teacher, that I don't have to be a principal, that I don't have to be a superintendent, that I don't have to be on the school board, that I can be an unbelievable entrepreneur, that every time I make more money, I invest a portion of that in the schools where I am. That every time I get another promotion, that means I got to get another mentee. That every time I get another client, that means I got to speak to 10 more kids. That every time I get another opportunity, that I'm giving to another young person an opportunity. But if we don't do that, education doesn't work. And so really quickly, as I begin to take you all's questions, I'm incredibly concerned about the fact that one of the biggest drivers of what we are going to see or not see is policy. And so school boards, local school boards, state school boards, and state legislatures are drastically going to affect what schools look like in every state in this country. And as much as we pay attention to federal policy, and as much as I like Arne Duncan, and as much as I think what the Department of Education in many cases is good, they are not going to affect what local schools look like the way local politicians are going to. Why is Morehouse not an incubator to create candidates? Whether they're here or not, whether it's through Morehouse Research Institute or whether it's through somebody that just has the entrepreneurial idea to understand that if we are creating a place that has the best and brightest African-American minds in the country, then clearly that means that they have vision for what the future should look like. And if they have vision for what the future should look like, some of them have the temperament to be able to exist within an electoral politic environment that they would be able to make recommendations on the policy side and hopefully begin to create relationships that build partnerships, whether it's on finance or whether it's around corporate or whether it's around the community, to be able to push forward policy that ultimately changes what the community looks like instead of just speaking good about what it doesn't look like. I'm so tired of black people making the definition of what leadership is how good you can make me shout. And you got Negroes that will come on this campus and make you shout to a state of euphoric inactivity where all you do is jump up and down and it's socially conscious entertainment and then you go back to class and nothing is different. What will change as a result of where we are? And so get some of these youngins off the block in Southwest who be philosophizing. Because you know when you philosophize, that means you got an idea. Nobody be on the corner philosophizing if they not feeling how something can be different. So take that youngin' that's philosophizing, pull him in. Take his homeboy that got his back, ride or die, and teach him to be a campaign manager. Take their homegirl that's the only one of them that got any money and make her the finance director. Take their boy that's on Facebook 23 hours a day and make him the director of technology. Take their boy that's passing out leaflets for the party and make him the organizer of volunteers. Incubate them in an academic system that has cultural support where you give them stipends so they don't have to hustle while they're learning it. And 18 to 24 months later, begin to connect them to a feeder pool of resources that now they can run for city council, for school board, for state ledge, and change the feeder pool of who's running for Congress instead of just plucking people from a party that all they're trying to do is say the right things at the right time to get the right money from the wrong people. What y'all gonna do? Questions? Let's see. Did anybody send them? I hope that through the Morehouse Research Institute that I am blessed to now be on the board of, that you all will utilize it as a way for Morehouse College to launch a discussion around education that, even as your president said last night, that will change the perspective of the world as it relates to what we need to do, not just to prepare black boys and black men, but to prepare global citizens that are ultimately going to change the world because they've been invested in the right way. If we do not do that, not only are we wasting opportunities, but we are in a place that was created for that very purpose. And now is the time for people to hear from Morehouse on this issue. I had a conversation with Roland Martin literally right before I came out. Roland Martin, Chris Webber, myself, Steve Perry, and some other men are very serious about having men's conversations about education. How do we challenge fathers to be involved in schools in a different way? How do we create commitments from men in community to say that women, that education is not a women's profession, but is the profession of the brilliant? And how do we begin to identify brilliant folks to be able to populate it? So it looks like, I appreciate the comments. Okay, what pragmatic impact has your work made? Or in other words, what systems have actually changed their methods due to your talks? Fantastic question. And in many cases, I think as you well know, a lot of the work that we do takes shape in small places. And so a lot of the work that I do as a consultant is around strategy. And so we're working right now and actually getting ready to go into Cleveland right now with the Morehouse Research Institute to do baseline research around the work that is happening in Cleveland reform strategy. But I was working on the front end of that strategy with the mayor to talk about what are some of the things that can be done, how that strategy works. And we're talking right now with mayors all over the country, some who control their school systems, some who do not, to talk about using that as a model. And so whether it's that work or whether it is the work that we've done around pushing back state legislation, and so right now we're working in the state of Ohio around a bill called 103, which Ohio had the nerve to introduce a new stand your ground law in the middle of the Trayvon Martin trial. And when you have legislators that have that much gall, that you would introduce new stand your ground when you have states that are repealing stand your ground, it says that you don't have a state legislature that's in line with what the goals of the people are. And so we're organizing people right now through a number of organizations on the ground in Ohio to be able to push that policy back. And so to your point, whether it is in Cleveland, and I'm from Ohio, so a lot of the work that I do is in Ohio, or with some of the work that I do as a strategist in different states. There has been some pragmatic movement. We have begun to help create organizations and institutions. I sit on the board and work with a number of folks. How many of you all are familiar with the Eagle Academy? Eagle Academy is a brilliant model, I think, not on the same level as what KIPP has been able to do. But they have built in the last 6 years 5 schools in New York City. And they are all for black boys. And so there is a focus on science and math. They have unbelievable parental involvement. And so it's also about how do we take those models that we see working. And we're working with some folks in Baltimore right now to create an Eagle Academy in Baltimore. So to the brother that asked that question, I hope I answered it. If I didn't, please tell me I didn't. And I will do better. How can we solicit corporate sponsors without privatizing public education? Great question. What is wrong with privatizing public education? So a lot of people have talked about how bad it is. And they talk about how bad it is because when we talk about privatization, we always hear next, I don't want white people getting rich off of educating our kids. Well, create the business. Rocket science is not. If we understand that public education ultimately will never have everything it needs through only public resources, then we ultimately understand that there has to be a level of privatization to be able to keep costs down, to ensure that as much of public money as possible follows students, and that private money can ultimately provide services that exist around the education process. So the question is not how do we prevent privatization, it's how do we ensure that privatization has a level of integrity, and that comes through policy. But on the privatization side, why aren't some of you thinking about transportation businesses? How do I begin to provide transportation to public schools? Do you know how much money that is? Do you know how much money there is in food service? Do you know how much money there is in janitorial? Do you know how much money there is? Even librarians in many cases are not union positions. And so there are even positions within staff that are non-unionized and thus create opportunities for us as entrepreneurs to create businesses specifically for the education space, to be able to maximize those businesses, become experts in them. And now it's not about how do white folks get rich off of education? Because I'll be honest with you. I would rather the Ku Klux Klan get rich off of educating black kids if it means my baby can read in the 2nd grade than leave stuff the same. And if you say different, you are crazy. Because what is the point? The point is, how do we create babies that have the ability to determine their future? And if you want somebody else to get rich, create the business. If you want somebody else to have opportunity, create the infrastructure. If you want somebody else to have the ability to come in and manipulate this system in a proper way to be able to ensure that not only are kids getting what they need, but you're able to make money in the process, then understand that there are enough places for you to be able to make money. Stop believing the hype and stop processing this through somebody else's political lens. If it's your political lens, then fine. We can debate the merits of privatization. But if you're regurgitating what somebody else said because you find yourself being a Democrat, then stop and think critically enough to be able to look at the fact that the way certain people want things to stay does not work. And if we don't change it, if we don't modify it, then nothing will change. Last question. The goal of education has become proficiency as opposed to mastery. Standardized tests measure proficiency. We talked a little bit about that. How can we create better schools when most people aren't willing to risk what it takes to change the school system? We do that, you all, and I think so often, and this was a great segue to close. So often we act like movement work. And so the operation of systematically changing policy, laws, procedures, institutions, was some kind of kumbaya moment where everybody got together to change it. And no matter what movement you look at through history, and no matter what place in the world that movement happened, it was never most of the people. It was never all of the people. Usually it wasn't even a lot of people. It was a small group of individuals that had vision. It was a small group of individuals that had a strategy. It was a small group of individuals that had gumption. It was a small group of individuals that were even, and sometimes crazy. Because how crazy do you have to be to create vision that doesn't make sense? To be able to create something that doesn't exist. And that is why most people are not inspired by modern day leadership. Because we have dreams and visions that make sense. And so why should I follow you when you got a down the street vision and I can see down the street and I walk faster than you? Those that fought slavery, those that fought segregation, those that wanted to see a black president, those who wanted to see African Americans succeed in business, those that wanted to see us be not just proficient but excellent in what we did, had visions that didn't make sense. And so how do you create a vision that doesn't make sense because it spits in the face of everything that we've been doing that actually doesn't make sense? The way you begin to change structure is by having aggressive and insane vision. Put yourself in the position to be able, through data and through research, to be able to create strategies that help you get from here to that vision. Put together teams that can win, not just teams that you like. I'm so tired of seeing coalitions of the agreeable. What good is it if we all get along if we lose everything? I don't have to be in a coalition with you because I like you. I have to be in a coalition with you because collectively, together, we win. And so we've got to create multi-leveled, multi-layered, sophisticated partnerships with folks that aren't all black, that aren't all Democrat or Republican, that aren't all this or that come from different places but agree in creating the same thing. And lastly, be courageous. Be courageous enough to risk something. Because only those that are willing to risk something are the ones that change the world. And only those that are willing to fall and make huge mistakes are the ones that have huge successes. I mean, look at it this way. Even falling forward on your face moves you closer to your destiny than standing still on your feet. And once you get up, you're in a better position to change what it is you're fighting for than those people that are sitting back comfortable, not moving at all. My prayer is that Morehouse College will continue to be not just a vanguard in educating African men, African-American men, diasporic men, but be an institution that begins to lead the way in how we talk about this issue, challenging both sides in a way that many other people will not, creating partners and institutional infrastructure that actually move parents and students and professionals to be able to do this work. And you're already on the way. But the reality is, if students are not part of that movement, and if you all aren't leading it and saying, I don't ever want to be a teacher, but I'm committed to education. I don't ever want to be a principal, but I'm committed to the development of proper education delivery systems. I'm not interested in being in the classroom, but I'm interested in creating a system that works properly. I'm not interested in being a principal or even on the school board, but I want to build business that supports education. I want to build business that makes money from education. If you all in this room partner on business ideas around education, you can create an entire school system. And there are folks in this room right now that have already started the process. Whether it's the charter schools that are in Atlanta that are doing well, or whether it's elected officials, some of whom were all at dinner with us last night, who are committed to seeing this done the right way, you've got a small army of people that will walk with you each step to be able to create something that doesn't currently exist. The question is, who are the few that are willing to do it? And so that is actually not a hypothetical question. I would like to know in this room, who are the men that are committed to building a powerful educational ecosystem? All right. Please stand. I would like to know Dr. Wilson and Dr. Bryant, if we can have a special committee of MRI to work with these young men that are standing around how we build the student component of creating an educational ecosystem, and begin within the new year, even with some of the activities that are already taking place around your president, launch something that these students have been committed to doing around the development of the educational ecosystem. And I'm willing to come in twice a month to sit from a strategy perspective with any students that are willing to show up to build it. And so if you all are down, let's make it happen. And let's make it happen in a way that nobody else in the world can do except Morehouse College. God bless y'all.
One more time for Jeff Johnson, Morehouse. This brother is committed. He wants to stay connected with Morehouse, so we appreciate you coming out very much. Right now, we want to invite Timothy Maxey, class of 2016, to come to the stage. Now, what you heard today was exposure to new perspective, new information, information designed to make you more aware of what's going on in education reform. And we take a pipeline K through college approach to education reform. So we asked Brother Timothy to come on board and talk about awareness in a broader perspective in his own way. Brother Maxey.
Like fresh oxygen, a new era of expectancy has entered Morehouse College, and another great awareness has come. For just as heaven's tears fall from the night sky, transcending the dirt, watering the seeds of redwoods that our ancestors once hung from, likewise does our heritage nurture unborn generations. See, the brilliance of our forefathers outshine the complacency and compromise that darken the hearts of so many we see each day. Brothers, remember where you come from and be aware of the place you are now, for the crown of the king comes not because he is smart, and not even because he is a man of Morehouse, but because he answered the call of his day, because he was relentless in the pursuit of justice. Be ye not perplexed, men of Morehouse, An African president should not be a surprise. Were we not the first kings? Ingrain it in your brain like the scars that appeared on the backs of our ancestors whenever they appeared 5/5. See, freedom cannot be taken. It can only be surrendered. Yes, our bodies may be chained and our souls oppressed, but our blood screams liberty louder than any new Jim Crow call. However, today in communities all over the world, many of our kinsmen are either asleep or dead. See, the world expects them not to wake up, and even those who do may find themselves lying on a Memphis motel balcony. But have no fear, gentlemen. You must stay awake. Become such a force of consciousness that government news feeds will be forced to examine your mental archives. Let your wisdom exalt the relevance of our struggle. You must stay awake because everything that you know is an asset and everything that you don't is a liability. You must stay awake. As black men, we must shun ignorance in our communities because ignorance, like FEMA, will let you drown with nothing left but your pride and your melanin. You must stay awake. Knowledge is a prerequisite of understanding. But how can we understand if our literacy is limited to price tags and social media? How can we be so sure of who we are if so few of us have studied and shown ourselves approved? Gentlemen, although your convictions may be well placed, knowledge is the lawyer acquitting your sentence. You see, there are prisons built for your mind. They come in 32 and 72-inch plasmas. They have glitter and lights, housewives and cribs. They have gladiators on stages competing for your viewing pleasure. They give you 24-hour sports and round-the-clock news. They want you to forget. No, they pay you to forget. They use your blackness for its showmanship. They let you sing and bling, confounding you with distraction. All the while, the back alley is open and deals are being brokered and souls are bought, sold, and paroled. Check the stats. They give you 20 years to live, 15 to 23 to have a child, then 25 years to life, clocking you like the S&P 500. Here I am, perfect master. I am the show you did not expect. I'm the one who thinks before he speaks. I'm the one who plans before he acts. I'm the calculator, the engineer, the adjudicator. I'm the memory remade into flesh. I'm the brain evolved 394 years later, stronger, faster, and smarter. Do you feel me? Puppet master. The awakening. It is coming and there is nothing that you can do. Awareness is rising. It is cascading down from a red clay hill, seeping from every classroom and every residence hall. The minds are meeting and the voices are speaking. Check it, Trayvon wasn't the first, and Obama won't be the last. Awaken, my brothers. Go into the quietness of your own soul. Face the darkness and find your conviction. Train yourself to house a firm and unshaken spirit. Do not stop until you see the light. Men of Morehouse, awareness.
Yeah. Let's give Timothy a hand. That was beautiful. Hey, don't walk out, brothers. Don't walk out. Hold up. 90 seconds. Timothy did a beautiful job. Thank you. I also want to give a hand to Jeff Johnson. Give him a hand, please. Listen, I appreciate you, Jeff, for the challenge. I appreciate all you brothers who stood up. We will be in touch with you. Professor Marks will see to that. As several have mentioned, we had dinner last night at the Davidson House and had a great conversation with Jeff, but that was not my first time meeting Jeff. I saw him several times coming to the White House in the last 4 years, and this brother is tight. And I want to tell you one brief thing about him based on a comment he made last night. He said, once or twice a week in my life, I get asked, are you a Morehouse man? And he regards that as a high compliment. And the reason why people ask him that is because of what you saw on stage, where he spoke brilliantly for about 40 to 45 minutes straight without referring to a single note, which means he has handled his business. He stands as an intelligent African-American man in command. He has domain knowledge. He studied hard. He has worked hard. He has a brand for himself, and he is a force for good. And the reason why people ask him, are you a Morehouse man, is because they immediately recognize him as a force for good. That is your challenge. That is your calling. That is your mandate. Thank you very much. God bless you. Have a great day.